Sometimes, running a TV show can be very difficult. This can be through a number of factors, but the most tragic is when the network seems to be outright against you from the beginning, trying to make you fail. We've seen this with stuff like Dave the Barbarian, making Fiends, or whatever happened to Robot Jones. For whatever reason, the network will all of a sudden decide, hey, we hate this show. Time to torpedo it and make it look like an accident. It's like a mob hit. There have been a lot of bad cases out there, but one of the worst ones, or at least the unluckiest one, has to be the Critic. This may not be the worst or most brutal, but it certainly is the most unfortunate. This show was created by some Simpsons alums, specifically the showrunners for seasons 3 and 4. In other words, the seasons where the show really got good, home to some classic episodes like Stark Raving Dad or Marge vs. the Monorail. They pitched a show called The Critic in 1993 to ABC, and it was all downhill from there. What happened? That's what we're going to take a look at today. By the way, this is a Patreon raffle video. Thank you to both Jay and Leaf Razor. It's both of them for different complicated reasons, and it's also late because of those same different complicated reasons. Link in the description below. If you want to have your own Media Mementos review, just donate to the Patreon because we have one raffle a month. If you win, then congrats. I'll do whatever it is you want, with some exceptions. Before we talk about what happened to the Critic, let's get to know the Critic itself, or rather, himself. As the title would suggest, the show was all about a film critic named Jay Sherman, played by none other than Jon Lovitz. Jon Lovitz is a really good actor, one of my personal favorites. He's a lot like John Candy, where his appearance and his voice are just so recognizable, but he blends into any role. Though I feel that Lovitz is always best when he's playing snobs, like Llewellyn Sinclair from The Simpsons, or Jay Sherman the Critic. Jay Sherman is very cynical, very down. After all, that is his job. He's supposed to be looking at all of these really bad movies more often than not, and then saying, hey, it stinks, which is his catchphrase. And I think that right there explains all about the character. In his eye, it stinks. And it can be just about anything. It basically follows his day-to-day life as well as having some bits of his show. Which means that yes, this is a very pop culture heavy show. And yes, it does involve a lot of cutaways. But not only do the cutaways serve the plot, being that they're actually part of his show, but they're done in such a way that it's actually funny. Even if the things aren't relevant anymore. It's not like Family Guy or Drawn Together Season 3 where it's just, hey, topical thing, popular movie, celebrity, reference, no joke, but reference. It actually plays with the formula, like Home Alone 5 where Kevin is left home alone and he's 23, but everyone still treats it the same anyways. The show also had a lot of guest stars, the most notable of which being the most famous film critics of all time, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. And given that this was made by Simpsons alumni, you know that the writing is top-notch. And you know what? It is! So with all of these great things going for it, what happened? How did the Critic meet its unfortunate end? Well actually, that's not the question we should be asking here. The real question is, how did it meet its 3 unfortunate ends? Yes, this is like Family Guy where no matter what, this thing just kept coming back for more. Only unlike Family Guy, it wasn't successful. Which also means that it's not like Family Guy in the sense where the creator gets so sick of the show and wants to move on to other things that he makes it as ridiculous and over-the-top disgusting as possible so the network will cancel it, but it just never works. But that's a story for another day. Like I said, the show was pitched and it was greenlit, and it ended up premiering in 1993 only to get canceled. Right out of the gate. 6 episodes in, canceled. Yeah, it lasted just as long as The Winner. That's not a good sign. Well, I don't know how that happened. It's not like the network didn't promote it or anything, not letting a single soul know that it was on. That's definitely not what happened. Oh wait, yes it is. You see, there's this little thing in advertising where, in order for something to be successful, people have to know that it exists. Simply putting out a product and not talking about it isn't gonna move copies. It's not gonna push interest. That's why I keep plugging my book everywhere I go. Plug. Shameless shilling aside, advertisements are necessary for a show's success. Especially in television back in the day. There were no guides, aside from TV Guide, which not everyone had. There was no DVR recordings, all you really could do was VHS recordings, but again, if you don't know what's on, you're not gonna record it. ABC just let the show go and let it die a horrible, horrible death. But it wasn't all bad for the Critic because Fox ended up picking up the show. It was kind of like what happened to Baby Blues, where the WB canceled it, but then Adult Swim picked up its reruns. But unlike Baby Blues, the Critic actually got its second season finished. And yes, it got to air. And Fox, unlike ABC, was more than willing to let people know that the Critic exists. This is where the cult fandom started. Yes, there is a cult fandom, and it's still going around today. Because, again, on ABC it didn't get a chance, but on Fox, you couldn't look away from it. It was everywhere. They were telling you all about Jay Sherman and his little show. In fact, it was so unavoidable that it even bled into other shows. I can't mention the Critic without mentioning A Star Is Burns from The Simpsons, one of Matt Groening's least favorite episodes of The Simpsons. Yes, he puts this right up there with Kill the Alligator and Run, and The Principal and the Pauper. We'll talk about that in a minute. They had to do this. They saw what happened to the Critic on ABC and wanted to do the exact opposite. And The Simpsons was their biggest hit, so they said, make a crossover with the Critic. Do it now. Doesn't have to be good, just do it. So, they just placed the Critic in there, and that's pretty much it. Admittedly, yes, it is a pretty decent premise of the Critic coming to Springfield to judge a film festival. But if you took Jay Sherman out of the show and replaced him with someone else, not even someone voiced by John Lovitz, just anybody else, it wouldn't have been any different. We don't get to see any of the other characters or get a feel for the environment. It's just him. He's there in Springfield. And that's it. The episode is good, it's got some classic moments, but the point is, it is a shameless plug, and it's a shameless plug that doesn't fit. It's obvious that it doesn't fit when you just look at it. Jay doesn't look right. He looks very out of place. Yes, the Simpsons characters can be over the top and cartoony, but they don't look like this. He's about Homer's weight and build, but he's half his height. So either he's a Gary Coleman-esque dwarf, or something's very wrong here. The Critic and Simpsons styles do not mix. Still, I personally enjoyed the episode, though I will say it's far from the best. Now, how did Fox kill the Critic? Because let's face it, you all know it's coming. Well, it's the same thing that happened to my favorite show of all time, Dave the Barbarian. What is that? Halfway through the season, this time being the second, they changed the time slot and didn't tell anybody. Yes, we're going right back to the whole you need to tell people things mantra. This is especially true with time slots. You know why? People are used to routine. So if a show comes on at 5 o'clock, you'd better believe that they're gonna do all they can to park themselves in front of that screen and get a lookin'. But say it gets changed. It's now on at 4 o'clock, but you actually tell your viewers this. Now, they'll be able to adjust. They'll be able to see it at the correct time and your ratings won't hurt. However, if you don't tell them this, then they're gonna tune in at the correct time, or what they think is the correct time, wondering why they're seeing something entirely different, not realizing that they missed the episode that they wanted to see. And if they just never find out, then they never see the show again and assume it's canceled, thereby giving up on it. You lose revenue, you lose attention, and that's the bottom line there, you lose. You don't have anything to gain by not telling people about these changes. You're only trying to hurt it, whether it be intentional or subconscious, or just laziness, that's to be determined. But that's what happened to the Critic. People just lost interest because it disappeared to them. They didn't know it changed times. They didn't know things were different. So, the Critic got canceled because its ratings were so low. Not like there was anything that the network could have done to fix that, huh? So it looked like it was the end for the Critic for a while, but 5 years later there was this thing called Gametap. It was basically just a host of some small games and some internet animation. This is also the same platform that gave Space Ghost Coast to Coast its revival. And you know what? They gave one to the Critic as well. But unlike Space Ghost Coast to Coast, this revival was not only not well received, it also had the distinction of being an entirely different show. I do want to talk about Space Ghost Coast to Coast / Cartoon Planet one day, so I'll keep this to a minimum so I don't end up repeating myself. Basically, they can't do the full 11 or 22 minute episodes like they used to. This is internet animation with somewhat of a budget. After all, they were able to get all the actors back. Still, it had the same sense of style. It still felt like the same world. Even though it was shorter, it wasn't really scaled down. Everything still felt the same. Yes, This is probably because they didn't actually really have to animate anything like they did on the original, given that everything was already made decades prior, but the Critic didn't have this. Maybe it is because they had to animate everything, but the world just felt smaller. It didn't really feel much like the Critic itself, because it wasn't. What it was Jay's show. All it was him talking about movies, and not really any fun, interesting movies, just movies that were out at the time. No real spin on it, just pop culture references. The writing also took a very big hit. Yes, Jon Lovitz was still here, and he did a great job. Still, that wasn't enough. It sadly delved into that style of humor I mentioned before, where it's, who needs a joke when you got reference? All you need to do is talk about something topical and automatically it's funny. Except no, it's not. You know how I know? Because the Critic episodes, whether they were on Fox or ABC, still hold up. There's hardly a bad one in the bunch. They're all fun, they're all engaging. The Gametap ones are not. This is just filler, it's fluff, and it's just nothing. A lot of people felt the same too, because it didn't last long at all. Yes, this is partially due to Gametap going under very quickly, but it also had to do with the fact that this was not good. This is not what people wanted. People didn't even really want a revival of the Critic, at least they didn't at the time, but if they were gonna get one, this wasn't it. And it's no wonder that the Critic has remained basically dormant since. Maybe someday he'll get to do something else, maybe his show will come back, but that's it. Gametap was the last we saw of him, and it looks like that very well might be the case. Jon Lovitz isn't getting any younger, and all the other people that were behind the show have moved on to other things. I guess the Critic's always gonna have to be one of those shows where you look at it and say to yourself, it's good. It's really good. But it could have been so much more. That's exactly the case. Networks today, or streaming services, or whatever, must all learn a lesson from what happened to the Critic. Treat your shows with respect, otherwise, everybody loses. So folks, that was what happened to the Critic and how it died 3 times. Of all of these, which one would you say is the most justified? As in, the least network executive meddly? What do you think of the Critic itself? Should there or could there ever be a revival of the show? Comment below and let me know because, hey, guess what? I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week for our special Valentine's Day episode, which is coming out 2 days before Valentine's Day, but oh well, I've been planning this one for a while, so I hope you enjoy.